Hi, I'm Warren Zenna, founder and CEO of the CRO Collective, and welcome to the CRO Spotlight podcast. This show is focused exclusively on the success of chief revenue officers. Each week, we have an open, frank, and free-form conversation with top experts in the revenue space about the CRO role and its critical impact on B2B businesses. This podcast is the place to be for CROs, sales and marketing leaders who aspire to become CROs, and founders who are looking to appoint a CRO or want to support their CRO to succeed. Thanks for listening. Now let's go mix it up.
Welcome to this episode of the CRO Spotlight podcast. This is Warren Zenna. I'm the founder of the CRO Collective. And, I've been using assessment tools in my CRO courses for about 6 years now, because I think it's really interesting to find out a consistent viewpoint of how people's competencies are related to very specific types of skills and competencies for CROs. And so I give them all this assessment, and we review them together. And it's assessments are really interesting. People take them, they kind of like a personality test, and they're really fascinated. Everyone has a really, sort of self-involved opinion of themselves. They want to see how they look on paper, But I came across a company recently through my contacts called Crucible, and they developed a very specific competency assessment for chief revenue officers for PE firms. And I was like, I got to talk to these people. So I met Lindsay Guzowski, and we had an amazing conversation, and it's possible I may even end up working with her. And I wanted to have Lindsay come on because I think assessments are fascinating. And I think what it is that goes into these things is fascinating. And I think it's really cool to talk about a couple of things. One is assessments, do they work? And B, how are they useful? And also the power of competencies and what the right competencies are and what the ways that we should be looking at this particular role and what are the things that we find mean success consistently. So to that end, Lindsay, hi, welcome. I'm so glad you're here, and let's get started on this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me, Warren. I'm excited to chat.
All right, great. So why don't you tell a little about yourself and how you got into this and a little bit about Crucible and all that good stuff.
Great. So I have a background in quantitative sociology that I pretty soundly ignored for the first decade of my career. I worked for an industrial supplies company in finance and operations, and then I went and got my MBA. And during my MBA, I was working for a private equity fund. And I expected to continue working in private equity and finance for the foreseeable future when I got a call from a recruiter who had a firm that did C-level hiring for private equity-backed companies. And he and I started chatting, and I realized that this was an excellent way for me to apply some of my desire to help build management teams to a space that I was pretty passionate about.
And why did they call you? Like, I'm just curious how you got on the phone
Sure.
with them. What were you doing at the time there that had them reach out to you?
I was doing just post-MBA level PE VP work, analyzing.
Which entails what? Analysis mostly?
Yeah, mostly analysis. It's
Okay.
analyzing
So you're
companies.
analyzing potential companies that you can put under management, basically.
Exactly. Cold calling, various companies that look like good targets, all that fun stuff.
Okay.
But my background, having worked for the industrial supplies company, was in a management rotational program, and I'd overseen groups that ranged from 15 people to 35 people, and had more of a general management background, which was one of the reasons I was appealing to the PE fund in the first place, but also looked great on a resume to say, oh, this is someone who understands operations and how to think a little more broadly about business. And so I think my partner at the executive search firm saw that and said, oh, this is someone who can help me grow and build a business. And so he pitched me on taking this tiny boutique executive search firm and growing it into something sizable. And so we did that. That was Falcon. And well, at Falcon, I would use assessments all the time. As you noted, they're great. They tell you something about people. It's exciting.
We're going to talk about that, whether they're great or not. I'm not sure. I think they are, but you know better than me, so I'm curious to know what you think.
I'll rephrase. Some of them can be great.
I mean,
How
look, I
about
don't
that?
know. It's
Um,
totally, really, I will get into that. Go ahead.
So I was using one that was pretty terrible. And the client that insisted on using this assessment kept eliminating really great candidates because they had a go, no go score on this thing. And that's the wrong way to use an assessment. But I got very frustrated one day and said to them, why do you use this? It doesn't work. It's eliminating great people. And the response was, well, there's nothing better out there. And I said, if there was something better out there, would you use it? And they said, yeah, of course. And I said, great. And I went and built it.
Okay.
And so it was, they did hold true to their word and used it in the end. But it's a really
It's a great
interesting
story. And there's so much I want to unpack now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
So the first thing is, and I'll let you answer these questions in any order you want. It just popped into my head. One is, how do you know assessments work? Number two is, what's a good one? What's a bad one? You just mentioned something really interesting, which is they're using it wrong. I'd love to know more what that means. And you said this sort of like go, no go. So I'd love to unpack all that stuff. And then I guess lastly, this will be a longer conversation, just what makes a good competency assessment?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with, how do you know they're good? So
Okay.
Department of Labor, which, you're really talking like minimum criteria for success here.
I guess you're probably right about that. Yes.
Yeah. That a correlation coefficient between the scores on your assessment and success being defined however the assessment wants to define success in correlation with some kind of outside number. So it can be your client rating the people that you're testing. It could be another benchmark test. It could be, years of longevity. As long as you have some numeric metric that you can tie it to, that correlation coefficient needs to be above 0.35. In social science, anything
Is that
that's
arbitrary? Like why 0.35? What's the science behind that number?
Yeah. So in social science, if you're above basically a 0.4, that's pretty good. It's deemed to be a reasonably correlated a statistic. And the reason for that is that people are more of an art than a science. Everyone's going to have something that's a little distinct. There are, vagaries to all of this stuff. But you want it to be reasonably predictive. And so that's in statistics deemed a moderate correlation. And that's fine. What you want to see is someone who's correlated above that. You really want to see people that are in the, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7 range when you're talking about the correlation coefficients for a given assessment. But the question is, what are you actually testing and why does it make sense? And so, can you guess what the answer is supposed to be for the assessment? If all of your questions are phrased in a way that the good answers sound good and the bad answers sound bad, well, people are going to guess that, and it's not going to tell you much, even if you can correlate it with something from the outside. The next thing you want to know is, am I actually testing what I think I'm testing? And when I mentioned that this was a bad assessment that this group was using, it was because it was a test for critical thinking, but it was a British test. So a lot of the phrasing and the way that it was structured was in a British context. So you're having American executives taking this on an outdated data set for a British test, which puts you in too many things that are a mismatch. And they were trying to test it to see if these executives had a sense of urgency and solid execution and other items, but it's a critical thinking test. It doesn't tell you any of those things. And so making sure that all of those align, that your reference set aligns with the people you're testing, that what you're testing is consistent with what you're looking to be testing, and something that's statistically valid. Those are really the three criteria I look for.
So if, aside from the obvious, which is that they should call you, if somebody's in the market for looking at assessments, what might be the type of questions that they should be asking that right now they don't know to ask? before
Yeah,
they make a decision to use it?
so the first thing is just asking a question about what underlies this. What is this based on? Is it based on success in that space? Is it based on a psychological model? A lot of assessments are based on some of the psychological frameworks that were developed in the early 1900s, some of which would have questionable
Okay.
ethics these days, which, if the science has been done subsequently to show that these are still valid, great. But you want to ask the questions about what it's based on. The second thing is, what is the reference set? If you're trying to test CROs, but the reference set is middle managers, everyone's going to look good. Well, that's not helpful. And then you want to make sure that your test itself can't be gamed. So understanding, and we get this question all the time, can AI take my test and get a good answer?
And the answer is?
For the Crucible, no. We've tried. It has a hard time because of some aspects of how you have to take the test.
Okay.
AI doesn't understand slider bars. It's very bad at rank ordering things. And our test has to be taken effectively when you think on the team level in the context of the answers of the other members of your team, which it couldn't predict.
Sure. Interesting.
Yet.
Okay. No, I
can see a future where AI could do that, but for now, no.
Yeah, no, it all makes sense. So, okay. So, because there are so many of these, right? I mean, when I was coming up in the ranks, I mean, particularly in the sales training space, I mean, it's ridiculous how many these are, right? And everyone, understandably, there's a lot of money in, before I hire a salesperson, if I could predict their success, I'd pay a lot of money to know that, right? Obviously, because it costs a lot of money to hire bad salespeople. And it's always the same statistics. I mean, I've done this for 30 years. It's always like the top 5 and then the middle 7 and then the lower 10, it's the same thing. And, we sort of look at those top 5 people or 3 people. We wonder, like, what is it about them? And how do I replicate those people? And how do I find more people like them? And it's always a big mystery. How do I do that? Is it like a birds of a feather thing? Do I find their friends? If they hang out together, maybe they think the same, or, sometimes even success at one company doesn't translate to success at another company because they're selling something different, or there's so many factors, right? I mean, many times it's nothing to do with their skills. Well, that's not true. It's their skills plus the environment, right? So they were managed really well. They had a really good place they worked at. They had a product that was amazing and that people wanted, and they had a really great marketing support that help them, and all these things that don't translate into just whether they're a good salesperson or not. And I don't think a lot of people look at that stuff enough. I think they just look at nothing more than sales performance, or like you were in the President's Club or something like that.
Agreed.
So where does your program sort of help solve those problems?
Yeah, so there are really 2 ways that we look at this. The first is that our assessment looks at a variety of different things for each individual. So we're looking at a high level, execution, emotional leverage, leadership, cognitive horsepower, and interpersonal skills. But we're also looking within all of those for specific characteristics and these are all 3 different characteristics we're measuring: urgency, relentlessness, and impatience. We also want to see, are you hands-on? Do you dig for root cause? Do you have detail orientation? And again, I just mentioned 6 different things we're measuring. And so with that, you get a nuanced vision of what someone tends to operate like. But that's great on the aggregate to say, yep, we've shown that this highlights success for CROs in the private equity space. What we've also done is worked with funds that use this test regularly to configure the profile for what works for them. So their governance style, their types of businesses they buy, and understand, here's what the profile of success looks like. Not because I, Lindsay, say, oh, I've looked at all these people and here's what visually I pick out about them. No, we use statistical techniques, data analysis, and machine learning to identify those trends and highlight the attributes that separate those people that are excellent from those that are merely good, from those that are going to be a detriment to your organization.
Interesting. So how did you determine that those are the things you're looking for? Like, where did that come from? Because you mentioned
Yeah.
one in particular that I'm interested in. It's probably more a personal thing, but you mentioned things like attention to detail,
Yeah.
which, one would logically think would be a good attribute, but it doesn't mean then that if someone's not a good attention to detail, that they'd make a bad CRO, correct?
Correct.
But why did you pick it then? What's the reasoning to have that in there in the first place?
Yeah.
Just,
So we
that
looked
was
at
as an example, just of like looking at the
right.
confluence of different things. What's the logic behind the selections you pick, the characteristics that you are testing for?
So utilized sort of three different components when we put together what we were looking for in the test. The first was some sociological theory. Second was some organizational psych theory. And the third was the 10 years of private equity executive search experience I had in talking to all these funds and saying, what comes up when we talk to them about what they're looking for? Went back and looked at job specs, went back and looked at the notes that people gave us, then went back to the funds and said, what are we missing? What do you want to see and understand? And some of the things they wanted to understand proved irrelevant when we looked at actual data from people. There was nothing there that predicted any form of success, whether it was good or bad.
I see. So in other words, what you're saying is then the things that you've selected have shown traditionally some impact on performance. That's
Correct.
why they're kept. So you had to go through things
Exactly.
a bunch of times to find out the
Yes.
ones that made a difference. And how long did that take before you were able to get to that point?
About 2 years.
Wow. Okay. I see. So in the beginning of this, you were sort of in an experimental phase in some respects. Wow. I assume it's always getting better though, right? It's getting better and better and better all the time.
Yep.
Is there a point, like a threshold where it's sort of like it's baked, like it's done, like we don't need any more data, or is it always, always, always getting better?
It would hurt me if I ever said, no, I have enough data and I'm going to put it on the shelf. I think there are places where we have, diminishing returns. And, we've tested upwards of 5,000 executives. The amount of additional data for our base model is probably not improving it with each individual test we give. When we rerun numbers and we try to improve things from there, you're not getting much better with each individual test. But the more data we collect, the more nuanced we can be about saying a CRO in a $100 million company might have some slightly different characteristics that we're looking for than a CRO in a $50 million company. Or does it matter if they came up through a sales engineer track versus a traditional sales track? Is there something about how they've approached this? Is that there's something about people who have a marketing background that has a different flavor and should have a different flavor for certain types of roles than people who don't? And so the more data we can collect, the more nuanced we can be about how we can slice and dice things and how we can make it that much more helpful for both individuals when they're looking to develop themselves and for companies when they want to figure out what the best fit is to slot into their team and or to identify the people within the organization that can help support that person.
Hey, everybody. First, I want to thank you all for listening. It's really important to me that you know how appreciative I am of the people who tell me they can't wait for the next episode. It's really remarkable, actually. Started doing this just on a whim. But I also wanted to share a little bit, if you're an aspiring CRO, if you're a head of sales, if you're a head of marketing, maybe you're a head of RevOps, and you're listening to the show because you're interested in being a CRO, you should really consider the idea of taking a look at our CRO Accelerator program. The CRO Accelerator program is an executive development program designed specifically to help revenue leaders become chief revenue officers. In fact, the CRO Collective was the first company to create a CRO education program. I'm very proud to say that. We sort of saw early on, 6 years ago or so, that the role was completely unsupported. Very few people really can define it. And as a result, the role is being misused and misappointed across all organizations. And the CRO Accelerator program was designed specifically to fix one side of the equation, which is to deploy people into the marketplace that were really competent about what the CRO role is, what CROs actually do, and the right way for them to start winning in the role from day one. So if you're a head of sales, if you're a head of marketing, you're a head of RevOps, you're a revenue leader that runs a team, and you feel like a CRO role is next for you, but you sort of feel don't qualify it, or you want to put your best foot forward, or most importantly, you want to gain the confidence of what it means to be able to go face to face with people who maybe have had the title before and still get the job. But most importantly, not just get the job, but succeed in it. We give you the tools, the frameworks, a program specifically designed for incoming chief revenue officers to win and know exactly how to handle all the trepidations that come with this role. This is a very complicated role, and the first 90 to 150 or whatever days are critically important to succeed in. Matter of fact, that's where CROs win, is that first acceptance letter during the interview process and after you get the job. So if you're looking to ensure that you succeed in the role and learn more about the role, and frankly, walk out of the course, in some cases, being the smartest person in the room about this role, consider taking the CRO Accelerator course. It's easy to find. You can just go to our website, thecrocollective.com. That's thecrocollective.com, and look under the course page, and you'll see the brochure. It has all the information, and then you can apply. I get all the applications myself. I vet each person, and I'd love to hear from you. So check it out. Thanks.
Yeah. I'm kind of keeping myself somewhat calm here, but you have no idea how interested I am in this. So I have so many questions. So, okay, let me think about them. The first one I have is, when someone's taking the assessments that you're taking now, are they being compared to the optimal CRO, or are they being compared to the other people who've taken the same assessment?
They're being compared to the model reference set. And so it's other people who have taken the assessment, but it's not like a live updating thing. So we want to make sure that it's a frozen data set, so that it's not a dynamic thing where if you came in and looked at your test, a month from now, that all of a sudden the numbers change.
Okay.
Because if you do it dynamically, the numbers will move up and down.
Perfect.
Slightly.
I get it. I do understand. So, okay, that begs the logic question, which is like, okay, so you freeze the results for the test takers, and then what? You let it get like smarter again, and then you stop it, and then you take it again. So is that how you do it? Is that how you kind of like get the data that you've collected to inform the assessment so that you can make it better, but you have to stop it so that you're not doing it dynamically during the testing, so that it's a constant.
Correct. And we rerun our models every 6 months.
I got you. So in other words, every time I'm taking this assessment, ostensibly you could say, I think, that the person who's taking the assessment today is taking the one that's the most advanced version.
Yes.
Gotcha. Would it be then safe to say then, if someone took the assessment today and the result came back, and then if they took it like 2 years later, the result could be different?
So it can, but not because we've updated the model in the test. We would just rerun it and show the difference. And we've highlighted that in the past when we've had minor tweaks to various things. And they are very minor. We're talking less than a percentile.
I see. So it's not significant enough.
So, but when people take it a couple years apart, a couple things tend to happen. Those who are self-reflective and who are working to develop themselves tend to change positively in specific ways. If you're trying to be more systems oriented, more strategically thinking, you're going to do things that build those muscles, and therefore your test results in those areas should improve.
It should improve. Well, the other aspect of this might be then, if you don't, then the test would prove that you're not someone who's teachable or coachable, and that
correct, or
environmental changes don't make a difference for you.
Exactly. Or that you haven't embraced those things.
Yeah, or you haven't embraced them, or that I'd say it's all the same thing. But okay, so there's that question. And then the other one is, so I still want to understand this because it's really fascinating. So you said that you've done enough of these that you sort of know now which characteristics tend to be associated with success.
Yes.
What are they? What are those attributes?
So on a high level, we would say all of them, but there are a couple that are particularly relevant. And I think that this is persistent across a lot of different private equity fund models, a lot of different sizes of companies. And one of them is, and particularly when you're talking CROs, heightened intellectual curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
because you want people who want to think a little bit more broadly about how it all connects.
Sure.
It can't just be focus on the thing, do the thing, execute the thing.
Yep.
We want people who exemplify higher levels of relentlessness. You need people who are going to continue after their goal, their problem, their whatever, more so than others. And I think that especially in this space that matters. I think a lot of CROs have had doors shut in their face enough that they built that muscle, but you have to be outsized relative to the rest of the population. So to be in that, top 3 or 5. And then one of the other things that I think is really important is this energy and endurance tied to a sense of resiliency. So it's not just that you're a high energy person, it's that you're consistently able to bring energy to the table, even in the face of negative, negative pushback or change.
I
or
get it.
whatever
I do. It's like not taking things personally and letting things roll off your shoulders and staying on mission and,
Yes.
recognizing that stuff's just part of the job and it's fine. I agree. It's interesting, everything you're saying. So,
I do want to just quickly, there are 2 other ones that have always been surprising.
Please. Yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, those are core that people are sort of like, yeah, okay, I can logic my way there. Pattern recognition and a disdain for losing are 2 that are ones that I get very excited about those when I see high pattern recognition, because it tells me someone will figure out how to make things happen regardless. And the disdain for losing. We measure both competitiveness and disdain for losing in our test, because competitiveness are your home run hitters. They're going to go out there. They're going to win at all costs. That's great. And you do want some of that. You want a lot of that in most cases. But the disdain for losing means that you're not going to allow your company to fail. You're going to find a way to drive success. You're going to ensure that it's not just you that will succeed, but your whole team. And that element tends to lift an organization to higher levels of success, not just the individual.
Okay, interesting. So thank you. So based on those characteristics that you see consistently represent successful CROs, would you then say, if you're evaluating an assessment, that if you don't see those things, that your recommendation be not to hire? Is that how this works pretty much? Are you sort of like saying, because you said before, go, no go, like, what do you mean by that? Because I think that's what I'm asking,
Yeah. So I think that the best use of an assessment is to understand where someone has strengths and where they have weaknesses. It would be very unfortunate to say in every situation, okay, I don't see those 5 things in high regard. Now, if they were really terribly low, like let's say you're in the bottom 5th percentile for all of those, yes, I would say that would be a questionable.
I think everybody would agree with that. But when you're getting up in the top range, right?
Right. Let's say you were in the 50th percentile for all these. So you're very average on those attributes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Then it's a question of where are your other strengths and how does that fit with the challenge at hand?
Yeah.
So if it's a scenario where you need someone to build out systems and you need someone who engages deeply with stakeholders and you need someone who can fit into a collegial culture, if they were exceptional in those areas and average in the ones I highlighted before, they could still be pretty successful. Because as you noted earlier in this conversation, the structure and process, the management of those people, the environment that enables success will really leverage the strengths that person has and allow some of their more average areas to be acceptable and even potentially be developed.
Got it. I obviously agree. I'm just curious about this one because this is where it gets really into weird artistry stuff, right? So,
right.
So, I'm involved in this a lot. So you probably are familiar with a lot of things I'm going to say. What happens usually is companies want to hire someone like this.
Yeah.
And they sort of think they know the kind of person they need, but they're not right.
Yeah.
Because they have their own biases of what it is they envision in the job. And they don't realize, in fact, that that's not necessary or it's not definite. It could be, it's a lot of other ways to look at it. And I find it usually comes from two different perspectives. It's sort of like almost like the philosopher or the analyst, right? So, if I'm dealing with a philosopher leader, they're more like, they want someone who thinks a certain way or behaves a certain way, right? And if I'm listening to a more like a metrics leader or someone, they're more like looking at someone who has, operational and, data stuff and finance stuff. And those are all of great qualities, right?
Sure.
But they're different kinds of people.
Yes.
And if I'm in a hiring position, I'm someone who is responsible for identifying candidates. The trap I see, and this is the headhunter, let's call it, or the person who's looking for candidates is sort of stuck in this weird conundrum, which is like, I want to give the client what they want.
Right.
But I also know that what the client wants isn't going to work. So, I know there needs to be some degree of consultative relationship that you have. But many times the organization isn't set up that way. What they do is they delegate this to like some, human resources group that says, here are the people we want. I want them to look like this. They have to have this background and blah, blah, blah. Go find that person. And I know this because I worked at a big company and I had to hire people. And I had to walk over to my HR people and I'd say, what are you sending me? What kind of people? And they'd say, well, you see, this is the thing. And I'd say, I know, but think a little bit. Look at this person. This person would have been great for me to talk to. Why didn't I meet? Oh, it didn't have this. I'm like, do you have any imagination whatsoever here? And, the problem is that now they get to you and they're making assessments of people who were poorly selected to begin with because the process was right. How does your assessment help with that? Or can it help with that?
So what I always recommend to groups that are going into a hiring process is to actually test the whole team. I want to test the CEO, the CFO, your head of operations. I want to understand what the team environment is before I try to find the right person to place into it. And the reason for that is because in some cases, you want to find someone that fits well with the team because there's a lot of overlap. And in other cases, you really need this person and you're hiring them to be a change agent to try to improve not just what exists, but what could be. And in order to do that, you have to understand where they're going to be able to leverage their strengths relative to others and how they can work with those people in a way that will allow them to be effective. And so we almost always recommend, not everyone follows it, we recommend that they use the team report because it enables that sense of understanding of, okay, they may not check 100% of the boxes on my job rack, but they do have the critical skills to be successful and they're worthy of being considered for this role. And I think that's where you can get past some of those box checking biases that are so present in the hiring processes.
It's crazy.
For a lot of these roles.
It's no different than anyone that's like looking for a husband or a wife,
Right.
It's like, we end up with somebody that we never thought we'd be with, But, here's a question I have about that. So this idea is great. I mean, what you just said is like sort of like mind expanding to me. Like test everybody in the company and see what the environment's like. And that'll give a better sense of what right person would fit there. It's like a no-brainer. I can't believe I never thought of it. But if you don't mind, I'm going to sort of present an idea in real time here.
Yeah, go for it.
What if you were to take like an assessment like yours, right? And you give it to the executive team as part of the hiring process and say, in order for us to be able to identify the right, I know you do this already, so I'm sort of speaking your language already, but I'm thinking it through. So I give it, we want to make sure we find the right person. And you all have your all opinions about what you want and all that, and they're probably valid. But if we give everybody this baseline assessment test, it'll give us a better understanding of the sort of the human dynamics of this organization, and it'll help us better inform the kind of person that we think would best fit with this. It's a great.
Yep.
So everyone takes this assessment, and then what you do is you take those results of all those people, and you pull the data of all those results, and you put it into like an LLM, and you ask it, what is the environment of this organization? And based on the organizational environment that you are able to analyze from all these results, do you think would be the qualities that would best fit an organization like this? And then test them for those.
So you absolutely can do that. It's a part of what our underlying team model allows us to do anyway, is to put that in and analyze it. Where I find it's really fun is, and where I thought you might be going with this, is that we've partnered with a couple other groups that allow you to not just see what the team report looks like from the executive team, but then get sentiment analysis from the frontline employees, from
Yeah.
the sales team, from
All of
everyone
it.
else.
I totally agree. It would make perfect sense to do that.
Yep.
100%.
And
And
then,
I've done these before myself. I mean, I do this sort of analysis because we do quantitative and qualitative analysis when we analyze a company's operation because, what people say is sometimes more valuable than what the data says. But I get it. This is great. I mean, it all just makes so much sense. And, I think that if people thought this way, that they probably get it right a lot more of the time.
yes,
And I wonder what your opinion is as to why it is that they don't.
that's the $1 million question, right?
Well, what do you think?
I think that people are two things. I think that they want to rely on past concepts of what has worked, not taking into account what the specific environment is here, or they're reacting to what hasn't worked. I just fired my CRO
Yeah.
and they were awful in this area, so I'm going to overreact and go the other way.
Yeah.
Or they're trying to think that they're going to outthink that process and try to come up with their ideal person. And that person's never existed. That person won't ever exist.
Sure.
And they get it wrong because they privilege the wrong things
Yep.
when they're trying to match that unicorn.
Yeah,
They're looking
human
for the
beings always
form.
think they can defy gravity. It's amazing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So, you're basically what you're saying is that I'm not surprised. It's all emotional reasons.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all just feelings, right? Opinions and feelings and beliefs. Okay, so let's talk about some other things now. So, can you share some examples of how some of your assessment results have influenced hiring or development? But give me examples of when your assessment maybe resulted in something that was surprising or unique, that had they not taken your assessment, they would have gone in a different direction.
Yeah, I have two recent ones. We did a team assessment a couple of weeks ago for a group that was two phenomenal executives in the CEO and COO roles. I mean, these guys will crush it. I don't care what industry you put them in. You could do anything with these guys and they'd be successful. And they were looking for a third leg of the stool and had a guy they thought was great. The PE fund was totally sold. The CEO said, there's something that doesn't feel quite right, but it probably just an interview component. We tested him and it turned out he would be not just a poor fit as an executive, but he would be such a poor fit with this team that he would actually make the team dynamic worse.
What was, if you don't mind, can you be specific? What was it about that person, or what were the characteristics that you were able to identify specifically that had you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, so it had low authenticity.
Okay.
Which is a problem. But the CEO also had below average authenticity, which is okay.
Two drunk drivers, basically.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So that was going to be an issue. Secondly, had low attention to detail, but also low systems orientation. So both wasn't going to use the systems in place and didn't have attention to detail to clean it up on his own. And was basically a people pleaser.
Gotcha.
And so you have this problem where nothing was going to be effective in the long run.
Okay, so that's fascinating. So now when you made this assessment of this candidate, I'm more curious about now the second part of that question is when you do this with that candidate and you come to those conclusions, what's the conversation that you have with the candidate? Do you tell them that that's the case, or do they never find out? How does that work?
Yeah. So in that situation, the fund and the company signed off the candidate, and we tested who they thought was the number two candidate. Number two candidate came out glowing.
And that candidate was not informed as to why. It was just we just found somebody who thought was a better fit.
I'm sure that's exactly what they said.
That's how they did it, right? Okay.
Right. But
that's interesting.
The more interesting scenario where we actually did talk to a candidate was that a company was looking to hire a chief marketing officer and gave her the test. She got good scores on the test, but not in the areas that were going to be useful for that company.
Okay.
So she was phenomenal in a lot of areas, but that company could not care less about those things. The things they wanted her to do, she was average or below average. And the company said, look, we're still considering hiring her, but can you talk to her about her results first?
Okay.
And we said, sure, why not? And talked to her and said, here's where you stacked up. Here's where these things are. And asked the question, how do you think this will apply for this company? And she said, I'm really glad you shared this. I was concerned that the areas that I want to continue to grow and shine and be impactful honestly weren't what they were looking for. And I said, yeah, to be frank, that's why I'm talking to you, is that there are areas that you would need development in order to really be as effective as you'd want to be in this role. But there are areas you could leverage in the meantime. And she said, I really want to lean into my strengths as opposed to mitigating my weaknesses. I'm not sure this is the right fit for me. And so went back to the company and said, hey, that was the conversation. They said, phew, we didn't want to have that conversation with her, but we knew that that was the answer that we were all going to come to.
So it sort of exposed things that made it apparent to everybody that this was a bad marriage, and they both decided to kind of like not go through the engagement.
Right. But she was actually really pleased at the end of the day because she knew that that was something that was worrying her, but had no reason to feel like that was right. That in her mind, she was like, there's got to be something there, but she couldn't put her finger on it. And the company couldn't either.
It's great. So how do you validate the traits you measure? Like, how do you make sure that they remain relevant as like market conditions can change and company needs can change? Like someone that's good today may not be good, after AI is invented, like, how do you
Right.
figure that out?
Yeah. So that's part of what we go through a pretty rigorous process is we're updating things and making sure that everything stays valid. We're touching base with clients. We run surveys. We ensure that if someone was scored as being a solid fit by both the fund and the test 9 months ago, that's still valid today, that the fund still feels they're a good fit and can update us on any changing conditions or other attributes. So we do pretty significant back testing on this stuff, but we're also always curious about, are these changing dynamics a fundamental industry shift, or is this just a point break in certain things that are happening?
Yeah.
Like it would be unfair to say, that the whole world has changed simply because there's one day where the stock market falls. But if the stock market goes into a free fall over the course of, months, yeah, that would be a huge problem. And the traits are probably going to be somewhat unique and different relative to a time of growth.
Can you do predictability on that? Like, let's say, for example, you're doing an assessment for a CRO at a company and,
yeah,
it would be, I think anyone would say, be safe to say that there's always a likelihood that there's going to be some issue in the future. So do you test against someone's resiliency in potential scenarios so that you can get a sense of what that would be like?
So one of the things that we do have in our test is what we call contaminants. And we use the metallurgy theme. It's, the Crucible being smelting metal and all this other stuff. I leaned pretty far into it. So contaminants are things that in that process can ruin your batch. And so we wanted to assess for items that under periods of high stress or dramatic change could become problems for that person. And so when we do that, we're looking at some very specific criteria there as well. And some of those things are, fragility. Can they handle feedback? Lack of awareness. Do they even realize what's happening? Hesitancy. Are they going to not make a decision in times where they need to? Inability to adapt. That's a really critical one. If you can't adapt, you can't modify behaviors, you can't pivot, you can't ensure that the company can react to whatever's happening. Fear of failure, where they have an elevated aversion to making mistakes, which can either cause people to freeze or can cause them to make decisions that are less appropriate for the risk tolerance of the business because they personally feel too much fear. And the last one is arrogance. And, in these private equity scenarios, people can be a pretty confident lot, but you don't want them to be arrogant. You don't want them to think they are better inherently than others. And so we do test for all of those in these pressure cookers to make sure that, they're not going to exhibit negative behaviors there.
Thanks again for listening to the CRO Spotlight podcast. We're excited about all the great guests we have. And more importantly, we're excited mostly about you for being avid listeners and supporting the work that we do here. Feel free, please, to share the CRO Spotlight podcast with any of your colleagues. We just think there's a great wealth of information here and want to get the word out to as many people as possible. And your support of the show is really appreciated. I wanted to share information about a program that we offer called the CRO Masters Council. The CRO Masters Council is a bi-monthly group of 6 seasoned chief revenue officers who are looking for a chief revenue officer board of directors, so to speak, that they could share what's going on with them, collaborate with ideas, get some feedback on what's going on in their current role. And these are great conversations. I facilitate them. The CRO Masters Councils, again, they're twice a month, and they last for at least 6 months to a year. So if you're interested in having your own CRO suite, your own board of directors of chief revenue officers, it's a private, confidential conversation that we have. It's infinitely useful. Imagine having a room full of other chief revenue officers you can talk to and say, hey, I'm working on this, or have you guys figured that out? Or I'm having this issue right now with my business or my results. These are just invaluable conversations with chief revenue officers. Chief revenue officers have a very, very unique role. It's a very lonely job, and only other CROs understand what you're going through. So that's why we created this program. So if you're interested in being a member of the next CRO Masters Council, which we have a number of them being put together right now, just go to my LinkedIn and DM me Masters or Masters Council, and I'll follow up with you and set up a call or send you some more information about it. Looking forward to seeing you there, and thank you.
So what about, you mentioned this before earlier in the conversation, it's really pertinent to the work I do, and that is, the different CROs for different stages. I mean, there's no question about this. I mean, I talk about this almost all the time, because the area that I go to work on is the time frame when a company reaches a certain point of their operational complexity where a CRO is a necessary hire.
Yep.
And that's earlier in the company's growth. And then there's the CRO that might, either ascend to be the one that lasts till they get, bought by somebody for $7 billion. But typically that's not the case. There's usually there's iterative people they bring in who have certain types of qualities that can handle a larger, more complex organization. How does your assessment deal with those things?
Yeah, some of it has to do with the fact that when you're thinking in the lower middle market and the middle market, you want people that have more of that hands-on, do-it-themselves kind of skills and attributes.
And you'd modify the assessment to accommodate the stage of the company, is what you're saying? You'd ask different questions?
No,
you just look at the answers differently.
It's just a question of the answers and
I see. You just look at the answers
like.
differently. I get it now. Okay, makes sense. Yep.
I was talking to someone earlier today about the fact that, when you're looking at bulge bracket private equity, having, a hands-on nature actually can be a hindrance.
Well, yeah, no question. Yes. I mean, you could see where they both would be a problem, and
Yes.
it is a really critical thing. Plus also another factor that's big in my world is the fact that the company's hiring their first CRO. Like, they didn't have any idea what to do with one, so there's no history to know that they know even how they would handle this person.
Yes.
And that's a huge factor, that's where we come in, but still, even regardless, it's a problem, Okay. So I want to close out here, but before I do, I'd love to hear a little bit more about like the test itself. Like, what is it? Is it like open-ended questions? Is it like one of those sort of like, totally disagree, totally agree? Like, well, what's the interaction and how long does it take to take the assessment?
Yep. It takes about 45 minutes and you can take breaks in the middle if.
So you could leave it and come back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Got you.
And, it's better that you finish a section of the test before you leave and come back, but there are several sections, so you can go and come back and take those breaks. But we ask questions in a number of ways. So there are some that are multiple choice. There are some that you have to rank order things in the way that you prefer them. There are some that use a slider bar. So you're actually determining how much you feel about something.
Okay.
There are some that you're picking between two binaries, and it's which you feel more strongly about.
Okay.
And noting that neither of them might be good answers. It's just which one do you more closely identify with. And using all of those different styles it allows us to make sure there's internal validity to someone's answers.
Gotcha.
So I'm not answering just A on every question, or I'm not answering what seems like the positive phrasing in every scenario, because that'll invalidate the test.
Yeah. Okay. And you have tests for not just CROs, right? You have tests for other types of executives, correct?
Yeah, it's the whole C-suite, and it's the same base model test. It's just, a question of how it fits together with the team.
What are the differences? So if you're hiring for a CMO or a CFO or a CRO, what are the nuances related to those roles? Are there any?
So there's some. It's when you're thinking about CEOs and CROs, those are actually more similar than some other roles, in part because a lot of private equity middle market CEOs came up with a commercial orientation. One of the big differences is in part of our test called the archetype, which indicates your bias for action and how you engage with others. And with that piece, you want to make sure that you don't have a mismatch between someone's role in the hierarchy and someone's natural slot. So if you have a CEO who has a pretty weak bias for action and likes to think over things before acting on them, you don't want a CRO out there who's a constant driver and needs to talk through everything, because it's going to be a huge conflict. Could you have the reverse? Absolutely. Because if you have a CEO who's, hyper driven and wants to talk things out, and your CRO
You might
be a
need
little
someone to
more
pull them back
reserved,
and have them be a little
that's
more
okay.
thought. Yeah, I see that.
Exactly. So
A
it's the
muffler of
hierarchy
sorts.
part
Yeah.
of it
Mhm.
that matters.
Yeah.
And then obviously, if you're looking at CFOs, we like to see a little bit more of some of the numerical attributes. It worries me when you don't have them.
Sure.
And operations, I want a little bit more systems and structure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, are there any recent trends or competencies you've noticed that are becoming more important in your assessments, like with changes in the market and technology? Because I had a conversation with a really prominent chief revenue officer last week, a really superstar. And he said the role's totally different now. It's more of a nerdy, wonky technical role because of AI than it ever was, and that the profile's changing. And there's more RevOps people that are getting hired as CROs than salespeople. So how do you accommodate for that in your assessments?
So I think that's a question of fitting in with the team and understanding the environment itself. Okay. It's not to say that those people that were traditional salespeople couldn't be those people. It just wasn't.
No, they could be brilliant at it. Yeah.
So, or what they've privileged in the past.
Yeah. Fascinating. So how do you work with companies and who are you targeting? Like, what's the people that you typically work with, and who are you looking to talk to about this sort of thing?
Well, I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to chat about this stuff. I love talking about it. But we tend to work with private equity funds who are looking to truly consider and invest in their executives. Some groups that are looking to build solid teams, and groups that aren't just going to churn through people every year and a half because the numbers weren't what they expected, and they'll just try someone new. So typically it's PE funds operating in the middle market who are excited about bringing on a team. We then engage with the portfolio companies themselves to assess the team and try to find the strengths, weaknesses, positive overweightings, and areas of potential development, and highlight that to the groups for whether it's for hiring, development, selection internally, et cetera.
So PE funds, what's the sort of focus on that target? Is it, I assume you'd work outside of that, but is there something unique about what's unique about the PE organizations and the PE environment that is particularly of interest to you? Is it because that's where you started, or is there a particular area within there that you feel is more ripe for what you're doing or different?
So I mean, it's where I have effectively come from, and it's
so it's a familiar place. You have an understanding of it, and you're in it, and you know that they have a need, and you're fulfilling that need. But it can live outside it, obviously.
Right. But the biggest reason that we continue to find fruitful ground here is that there is such a high replacement rate of executives, and these hires are so critical. And these businesses are so critical, especially in a time where hold periods are lengthening. Roles like CROs are that much more important. And these funds aren't necessarily getting any better with their traditional methodologies at hiring people in. So I find it to be an area where we can make a lot of change and a lot of impact for the benefit of these businesses.
What's your opinion on why it is that PE firms turn people over so much?
I think it gets back to some of those emotional decisions of trying to find a reason that things aren't working and not knowing what else to do. But I also think it's because they made poor hires at the outset because they're hiring for what they need or what they think they need at the time they're hiring, not thinking about what they're going to need as the business develops 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's just like, seems to be it's probably 2 or 3 themes, but this one I think is the largest thematic chord that runs through every single thing I'm doing. And it's this idea of short-term myopia. Yeah. And I think it's just like the biggest disease. I read this really cool article recently. It was a medical journal I read because I'm interested in that. And he was talking about that in the 60s, they developed this sleeping medication that really helped solve the insomnia problem for people. And the problem with it is that all the drugs on the market today that help solve or are attempting to solve insomnia don't actually solve enough. What they do is they make you fall asleep, but you don't sleep in a healthy way that your body needs sleep. It sort of mimics sleep. It's almost like a tranquilizer in a way. But it does just enough that people keep using it because there are no other medications on the market to solve it. And the reason is because this one did. And what happened was that this is messed up, and I will make this relevant to this, I promise you, is they found out and they knew that poor sleep, bad sleep, is a originator of so many other ailments that we have, that by curing sleep, it would remove the need for drugs in the marketplace that help cure the ailments that bad sleep causes. So they got rid of this drug so that people couldn't sleep better, so they can keep on. It's nuts, but this is right. But this is really what it had to do with. It had to do with the fact that the marketplace is driven by a need to always want to solve things as quickly as possible.
Right.
And so the whole reason that all these sort of weird, crazy, like almost evil sounding things happen is because people, corporations, systems, conglomerates, people, humans don't have an inherent willingness or understanding of how to let things take time.
Right.
And so they look at things that are going to happen right now, and they make decisions based on what's going to happen right now. And the decisions that are made for right now are very rarely the right ones for what's going to happen later. Almost all of them, in fact. And so when we look at people and systems and the way we replace systems or solve problems, if we're always solving for the thing that's going to happen right now, we're going to always have to keep solving for what's going to happen right now. Because that thing's going to end, and then there's going to be another thing we have to solve right now, which will be different than the thing we just had to solve for last time. But if you wait long enough, all those things are related to some larger systemic issue that would be solved forever. Yep. And I think when you're looking at hiring people, it's probably the biggest issue because human beings take time for their talents and skills to be manifest in the organization. But I need you to get something done for me today. And I think this is a crazy, amazing philosophical thing that we're trying to solve here. I look at it as like the whole thing, So what you're saying just speaks to all this stuff. It just fascinates me. So, thank you for indulging me on that.
Sure. It sounds like we should give private equity fund managers the marshmallow test and go from there.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the marshmallow test?
No.
So what they did is...
Yeah, I saw that. Well, you put them down, the 2 kids, right? And which one eats the marshmallows, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and they did a bunch of studies on that back in the 80s, and it turned out that the kids who could not eat the marshmallows had better success in life when they did a longitudinal study.
Short-term gratification, if you can, and I'm the worst. I mean, I'd munch those marshmallows in 2 seconds when I was a kid. I would say like,
It's,
give me the marshmallow, and I'm not proud of that, but it's just true, So I do have a lot of respect for people that can say, yeah, I'm going to get 7 later. That's, wow,
right.
that's a pretty impressive person, And I agree. That's a personality trait.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So you're thecrucible.com. Is that what it is, your website?
Thecrucible.com.
Uh-huh. And typically, what's your commercial model? Like, how do people work with you, and what's the type of engagements that people have when they work with your systems?
Yeah, sure. So if it's for an individual portfolio company, you can buy either a individual assessment. So you just want to test your CRO and find out how to best work with that person. Or you can take the team assessment, and that includes all the individual assessments plus the aggregate team assessment where we, go over that. If I'm working with a fund, frequently they sign up for a subscription so that they can offer team reports to all of their portfolio companies and use it in diligence and use it when they're doing, operating partner hiring and things of that nature. So we have both models, and we're happy to discuss how that all works depending on volume.
As I suspected, this is an amazing conversation. I love this topic. It fascinates me. And I think what you're doing is great. And as I know you and I have been talking, figure out some way to work on these things together. And I thank you for your time and your expertise.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here, and I'm always impressed with the work you're doing. So keep it up and keep building great CROs.
Thank you. Great. Well, looking forward to talking again.
Yep. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the CRO Spotlight podcast. The CRO Collective's mission is to help CROs succeed and help founders and CEOs build CRO-ready organizations. You can find out more information about our services at thecrocollective.com. That's thecrocollective.com. And we look forward to having you join us next time.